Bienvenidos al curso Módulo de Competitividad 10, código FG708, semana número 3. Nuestros temas a desarrollar en esta clase son los siguientes. Number 1, Soil Conservation. Number 2, Sustainable Land Use. Number 3, Agroforestry. This is Elio Ochoa, environmental engineer, and let's continue with our class. Class objectives. Number 1, to become aware of the importance of soil conservation in Guatemala. Number 2, learn how to make a sustainable use of the land. And the last one is get knowledge of some soil conservation techniques. Let's continue. Soil conservation. A definition of soil conservation is the prevention of loss of the topmost layer of the soil from erosion or prevention of reduced fertility caused by overusage, acidification, salinization, or other chemical soil contamination. Our main objectives here are control of erosion and maintenance of fertility. This is a general objective for soil conservation. Let's continue. We can use various methods of soil conservation like the physical, the chemical and biological degradation, sometimes grouped as decline in soil fertility. As I mentioned before, our objective here is the maintenance of fertility, and also we can get our production at the same time that we can keep the soil conservation and other natural resources. Let's continue. In other words, with soil conservation, we need to avoid erosion. Also, we need to avoid soil infertility and prevent water, air, or chemical or biological pollution from destroying the soil. Or in other words, soil conservation is the practice of protecting and improving the quality of soil to support plant growth and prevent erosion, water pollution, and desertification. Soil conservation methods include crop rotation, cover crops, mulching, contour plowing, terracing, and no-till farming. In here, we will see another method of soil conservation that benefits farmers, the environment, and society by increasing crop yields, reducing soil loss, enhancing water quality, and mitigating climate change. Let's continue. Sustainable land use. As I mentioned before, our objective here is the conservation and production at the same time that we can keep our productivity. Expressed as a pseudo equation, sustainability equals to productivity plus conservation of resources. Sustainable land use is the practice of managing land resources in a way that meets the needs of present and future generations, while minimizing environmental impacts. Some examples of sustainable land use are conservation agriculture, which involves minimal soil disturbance, crop rotation, and organic mulching. Another one is agroforestry, which integrates trees and shrubs with crops and livestock, enhancing biodiversity and soil quality. Agroforestry and its definition. Agroforestry refers to land use systems in which trees or shrubs are growing in association with agricultural crops, pastures, or livestock, and in which there are both ecological and economic interactions between the trees and other components. Agroforestry is a collective name for land use systems and technologies where woody perennials like trees, shrubs, palms, bamboos, etc., are deliberately used on the same land management units as agricultural crops and or animals in some form of spatial arrangement or temporal sequence. Here we can see that agroforestry is a combination of trees, shrubs, animals, and some type of grass. Agroforestry aims to achieve a more ecological, diverse, and socially productive output from the land that is possible through conventional agriculture. Agroforestry can also be defined as a dynamic, ecologically based natural resource management system that, through the integration of trees on farm and in the agricultural landscape, diversifies and sustains production for increased social, economic, and environmental benefits for land users at all levels. We can say that agroforestry is also a practical and low cost means of implementing many forms of integrated land management, which seeks to reduce human impacts on land. And it contributes to a green economy by promoting long-term sustainable and renewable forest management, especially for small-scale producers. Now let's talk about soil conservation methods. The first method that we have here is the vegetative coverage. And vegetative coverage is the percentage of land area that is covered by plants. Here we can see an arrow pointing to the grass. Vegetative coverage can be measured using satellite imagery, field surveys, or computer models. Vegetative coverage can affect various environmental factors such as soil erosion, water quality, biodiversity, and climate change. Vegetative coverage can be influenced by natural processes such as precipitation, fire, and succession, as well as human activities such as agriculture, urbanization, and deforestation. Vegetative coverage can be enhanced by implementing conservation practices such as reforestation, restoration, and agroforestry. Another method of soil conservation is the contour practices. The function of this method is constitute an obstacle that impedes the passage of water, thus reducing its speed and its capacity to wash away the soil. Here we can see an example of this soil conservation technique. There's a hill and you can see the structures that help preventing of soil going away from the hill. Contour practices are methods of farming or gardening along the natural contours of the land rather than across them. Contour practices help to reduce soil erosion by slowing down the runoff of water and preventing it from carrying away the topsoil. Contour practices also improve soil fertility by retaining moisture and organic matter in the soil and preventing nutrient leaching. Contour practices can include contour plowing, contour planting, contour terracing, contour bonds, contour strips, and contour hedgerows. Contour practices are suitable for sloping lands with moderate rainfall and soil depth and can be combined with other conservation measures such as mulching, cover cropping, and agroforestry. Let's continue. Another method is using multiple crops. The function of this technique is to increase the vegetation cover in time and space. Multiple crops for soil conservation is a practice that involves growing different types of plants on the same land to prevent soil erosion and improve soil fertility. In this case, we can see here a layer or a crop 1 that was planted. Then we have a second layer or crop 2. And finally, we can see at the bottom the crop 3 that was planted as a third crop to protect the soil. Some benefits of multiple cropping are it reduces the risk of crop failure due to pests, diseases, drought, or climate change. It increases the diversity of food and income sources for farmers and consumers. It enhances the natural cycles of nutrients, water, and organic matter in the soil. It increases habitats for beneficial insects, birds, and wildlife that help control pests and pollinate crops. Some examples of multiple cropping systems are intercropping, planting two or more crops together in the same field, such as maize and beans, rice and fish, or wheat and clover. Relay cropping, planting a second crop before the first one is harvested, such as sorghum followed by cowpea or potato followed by cabbage. And another example of this method is agroforestry, combining trees and shrubs with crops or livestock such as coffee or cocoa under shade trees or fruit trees with pasture grasses. We mentioned this method before. Let's continue. Another technique is using green fertilizers using crop rotations. And let's check a little bit more about this technique. Crop rotation is the practice of planting different crops sequentially on the same plot of land to improve soil health, optimize nutrients in the soil, and combat pests and weed pressure. Different crops have different nutritional needs and are susceptible to different pathogens and pests. If a farmer plants the same crop in the same place every year, she or he continually draws the same nutrients out of the soil and attracts the same pests and diseases. Crop rotation helps return nutrients to the soil without synthetic inputs, especially if legumes such as beans or peas are included in the rotation, since they can fix nitrogen from the air. We can see here that we have maize and wheat, and we can plant in our land first the maize, and then after a period of time we can plant the wheat, because this way we will be able to recover the nutrients of the soil. Crop rotation also works to interrupt pest and disease cycles, improve soil structure and organic matter, increase biodiversity on the farm, and reduce erosion and runoff. Crop rotation can be simple, of two or three crops, or complex, a dozen or more crops, depending on the farmer's goals, resources, and climate. Some examples of crop rotation plants are corn, soybean, and wheat, rye, potato, and clover. Or another example is oats, peas, and barley. And the last one is cotton, peanut, and sorghum.